Hey, what's going on, guys? We're hooked up to what I think is a really nice walleye on a night crawler today. And what I want to be talking about today is when and where and why to use each type of live bait for walleyes. There's just certain applications, certain times of year, certain rigs that certain live baits work better than others. And that's what we're going to be talking about. So we're also going to add in a few things about alternatives to live bait that you can use, as well as some tips at the end of this video on live bait storage, how to keep it fresh, and just how to make sure it's nice and lively. So we're gonna get this walleye in the net here, and then we'll talk some live bait. This is a real nice one, guys. Real nice one. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, baby. Look at that walleye. Oh my goodness, guys. That is a hog. That is one of my biggest walleyes of the season so far right there, and came on a night crawler. Night crawlers are awesome, awesome live bait. And just put that out there on the slip bobber, dangle it over his head, and whammo. So yeah, let's get into the live bait and kind of go over why we use each one when we use them. I'm gonna let this fish go. Well, guys, that was a perfect fish to start my morning this morning and this video as well. I had tried leeches before that, and I had put them on some fish and they didn't want to eat them. Switched to crawlers, and bang, caught that nice one, and ended up catching 3 more nice walleyes on crawlers this morning, which just goes to show you how finicky and picky these fish can be on a certain live bait at times. So we're gonna get into the content here. We're gonna start with leeches. We're gonna move to crawlers, then we're gonna move to minnows, kind of break them down, when you should use them, when you should not use them. And then we'll get into a couple of the other topics that I mentioned in this video a little bit later. So with that said, let's start with leeches. Now, leeches are probably the most popular live bait for walleyes, and there's a few reasons for that. Number one, they're easy to get across most areas walleyes are found. Number two, they're pretty lively and they stay on the hook well, and they also are fairly easy to keep. And number three, walleyes absolutely love leeches. And leeches were discovered as walleye bait in the 70s by Al Lindner and a couple other folks over in Minnesota. Before that, they were not commonly used as bait. Now, obviously, they're a mainstay pretty much anywhere that you can find walleyes or walleye anglers. So you can start using leeches virtually anytime after the water hits 40 degrees and higher in the spring. However, I've found that 50 to 70 degrees is a really good temperature range to start fishing with leeches. It seems like that's kind of the sweet spot for me. You get a little too warm and you start getting into night crawler territory. Too cold and the leeches don't want to swim. They want to ball up on the hook. However, you can hook a leech in the side rather than behind the sucker, and it will tend to swim a little bit better and not ball up as much if that water's below 50 degrees. But typically 50 to 70 is a great temperature range to start. Now, leeches can be fished on a jig head, plain jig head. They can tip a jig in plastic. They can be used on a slip bobber, which is probably my favorite way to use leeches. They have a natural swimming action that just works really well under a slip bobber. They can be used on a Lindy rig, a floating jig head. They're a very versatile bait. Almost always you hook a leech through the sucker and let it try and kind of swim and undulate away from the hook. I really do like jumbo leeches most of the time for walleyes, especially bigger walleyes, but there is times where downsizing, especially during a bug hatch, can be really, really effective. They don't necessarily want a meal. They want just a snack or what they call an after dinner mint. And that little tiny leech is just perfect, like on a small hook, like a number 6 octopus hook. Just so small and compact and buggy looking that they'll eat it. So you kind of have to experiment with size when it comes to leeches. One rig that I don't typically use leeches on would be like a spinner harness or a spinner rig. And the reason is I just don't think they work well on that rig. Number one, they tend to spin when they ball up and they kind of go all wonky and sideways. They don't have a lot of flow to them like a night crawler does. And they're always trying to swim, and the rig's kind of getting pushed from side to side. And also, it's really hard to hook them with a double hook rig because they'll just twist it up. So you kind of have to use a single hook rig on them, and you get a lot of short strikes with them. So that's really the only way that I don't typically fish leeches. They're just super versatile. and they just absolutely catch walleyes most times of the year. Now, let's move into night crawlers. So night crawlers, for me, typically are a warm water bait. When the water hits 70 degrees and above, you just start catching more fish on night crawlers. And I don't know the exact reason, but I've had really, really good luck watching that temp. Like this morning, I had 72-degree water. Last time I was here, I had mid 60-degree water. I was catching them on leeches last time. Today, they wouldn't bite them. They started biting crawlers. So it's a pretty good gauge of when to start using night crawlers. Now, that said, if you are using night crawlers around panfish, you are gonna get picked off way too fast to be efficient. So in that case, you may have to stick with leeches. Panfish tend to bite them a lot less, or maybe even switch to minnows if they're really pesky. But if I can get away with it in the summertime, summer months, I love to fish crawlers. And I like to fish night crawlers on a jig head, just pitching it on a light jig head. That works really well. Again, slip bobber, obviously like this morning, works well. One way that I do fish night crawlers a lot that I don't fish leeches as much is a split shot rig. And a split shot rig with a night crawler is super, super deadly in current especially. So if you're fishing a river system, even a small river, or if you're fishing around an area that's got a lot of moving water, you can pitch that split shot rig out and just bounce it along the bottom through the current. Absolutely deadly for summer walleyes and just about every other species as well. And again, crawler harnesses or spinner harnesses, the night crawler is the bait for those, in my opinion. It's the perfect bait to put on a 2-hook spinner rig and troll with, because it's got that really flowy look to it. It's long, so that second hook always sticks in the back of the bait and you get those short strikers. And there's just something about a night crawler on a spinner rig that really, really works. You can also use them on a Lindy rig, or one of the great ways to use a crawler is to use a worm blower and actually inflate the night crawler so it floats above the bottom. Put it on a Lindy rig and just drag that super, super slow. Let it flow behind that sinker and it'll sit up above the bottom where those walleyes can see it. So there's a few applications where night crawlers really shine, and typically it's in warmer water for me. Now, night crawlers do come in different sizes, and today I was using big jumbo ones because I was targeting big fish, and I just had a feeling that was gonna work for those fish. However, there are certain conditions in which I like to use a lot smaller night crawlers. In some places you can get smaller baby night crawlers, and especially on a jig head, it just seems like they really work well on a small light jig head when the fish are a little bit more finicky. So just experiment with the size if you have the option. And if you don't have the option to downsize your crawler, just cut one in half and use a half a crawler on a jig head. That kind of shortens up the package a little bit too. It makes it easier for the fish to eat that whole thing. Sometimes when you're fishing a whole crawler on a jig head and fishing it fast, the fish will grab the back and tear it in half and you'll miss the fish. So definitely a good idea to experiment with the size on your crawlers. Let's move on to minnows. So minnows really can be used just about any time of year. They're great for ice fishing, obviously, but they also work really well in the spring on a jig head. You know, you can really work over an area efficiently with a jig and a minnow, and it works to catch walleyes all the way through, you know, June. Then I typically start to catch walleyes more on slip bobber rigs and minnows into the summertime. And it doesn't always work. Some days those fish are just keyed in on bugs and they don't want to eat a minnow. But other days, you've put a minnow out there over them and they just come up and absolutely annihilate it. But I really like those slip bobber rigs in the summer because it keeps that minnow suspended above the weeds, and it keeps them out of the cover, keeps them from getting tangled up. Now, minnows also start to work really, really well on rigs in the fall. And this is one of my favorite ways to catch big walleyes in the fall, is to rig a big sucker or a big chub behind a long leader on a Lindy rig. And there's just something about big baits in the fall that those big fish love. And you can also fish a slip bobber rig with a minnow in the fall as well, and that works pretty good too. But on those deep humps and those deep rock areas in the fall, it just seems like that Lindy rig is absolute money. So it just depends on the time of year and depends on the fish's mood a lot of times for minnows. And as far as size goes for minnows, I really like to start small in the spring and kind of work my way bigger as the season progresses. And then I get really big up to like 8 inches in the fall time. They'll eat a pretty big bait in the fall. So I usually start with like fatheads and smaller minnows in the spring, kind of move to shiners and medium suckers, and then large minnows in the fall. So there you go, guys. That's kind of how I use all these different live baits, the where, the when, the why, the how, etc. Now, it is not a comprehensive rundown necessarily. There's a lot of other ways to use live baits. I did not cover all of them, but hopefully I covered enough that it gives you guys an idea of where to start. And make sure you get creative and try all kinds of different stuff. It's always fun to experiment. And if you're not getting bit on one live bait, switch to another one, give that a try, and oftentimes that'll save the day, kind of like what happened to me this morning. Now, let's get into a couple really quick alternatives for live bait if, say, you run out or you just weren't able to get any. One of the coolest things I've seen lately is the Billy Rub baits scent. So I've been using these for a while now, but Billy Rub keeps making more good scents, and Leech is my favorite one right now. Leech and Nightcrawler are both good, but basically it's just a really sort of a paste, and you can rub it on any bait out there and it'll stay on the bait really well, create a scent trail, and that really helps with that scent side of things and helps fool the fish's nose when you don't have live bait. Now, another cool product that's come out recently is the beaver tail leech. And the beaver tail has been used for a long time by panfish anglers to basically catch panfish in the wintertime primarily. But it is actually preserved beaver tail, and it's dyed in a bunch of different colors. Well, now they're making strips of it. And the strips work amazing on a spinner rig, especially. It keeps those bluegills from picking them off. Beaver tail's way tougher than a natural nightcrawler. Has the scent, has the action, and it's way better action than a soft plastic would be. So definitely check those out. I'll leave a link down below for the Billy Rub and the beaver tail as well, so you can pick those up. And there's a couple options for you if you get stuck without your live bait. Couple tips on keeping live bait alive. The first thing with almost any live bait, leeches, crawlers, minnows, is keeping it cool. So right now I have leeches and crawlers with me. I have them in a cooler with ice. And you can move a crawler or a leech to warmer water from ice cold water and it's not gonna hurt them. Minnows, on the other hand, you have to kind of try and keep the water temperature similar to what you're using them in. So in the wintertime, if you're using them for ice fishing, you want that water as cold as the lake. So if you're taking them out of a warm bait shop, you wanna add some snow to the bucket before you put them in the water, and vice versa. If it's warm out and you've got 80-degree water temps, and you get those minnows at a bait shop that chills their water, you're gonna wanna put that bag of minnows in your live well and slowly warm up the temps until you get closer to that lake water temperature. Otherwise, they're gonna die within minutes of throwing them out in that warm water. So the biggest thing with all of them, again, is keeping them cool. Obviously, leeches and minnows, you gotta change the water. If it looks cloudy, just put fresh water in there and you should be good to go. With crawlers, just pick out the dead ones if there is any. And you don't really have to do a whole lot with crawlers as far as maintenance. They're pretty tough, and as long as you keep them cool, you should be good to go. So there you go, guys. I hope that video helps you out with your live bait and your presentation and your timing, and hopefully helps you catch more walleyes. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Get hooked up.